Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Bass & Associates, First Data Resources, and by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the UNO Television Studios, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome once again to Consider This. If you have lived in Omaha a long time, there are certain players that become very familiar to you in civil rights, in concerns of North Omaha, South Omaha, even the neighborhoods. A man who's been a player for a long time has sort of come back into view. I'd like you to meet him today. Charles Parks, welcome.
Thank you.
Charles has become, I guess, recently infamous, in a sense.
I hope not.
Well, in the sense that I think you kind of at least woke Omaha up a little bit when you announced that your Coalition Against Injustice was going to picket the College World Series, one of the icons of sort of Omaha's doorway to the rest of the country. And you had certain concerns, which we'll talk about. But I think you kind of sort of hit the mule over the head with the 2x4 by choosing that particular time to really make your first splash.
Well, you know, that was one of our plans. You know, it was designed to do just that. And the College World Series basically was our stage.
All right, you've set the stage now, and you've said that you are very concerned about the amount of tax dollars spent in primarily North Omaha, but in other, I guess, the Eastern Corridor, the poor, traditionally poor parts or deprived tax-wise parts of Omaha.
Sure.
And you set out a list of demands. I think the one that caught a lot of people's attention was a separate school district for North Omaha.
This is true.
That would sort of another kind of a wake-up call.
Well, to me, that wasn't the wake-up call. The wake-up call was really held months before when the citizens of Omaha decided to vote to resegregate the schools. You know, there was a real fancy campaign full of videos, real slick videos. And basically they were talking about, let's go back to neighborhood schools. And when you have a city like Omaha with, where the neighborhoods are so segregated, when you go back to neighborhood schools, you go back to segregated schools. This was the first year that we went back to segregated schools, and the first thing that we experienced in the black neighborhood was separate and unequal schools. And so because of the fact that we had separate and unequal schools, I know when I went to school in Omaha, to grade school, I went to segregated schools. My children went to schools that were set up for this busing for integration, and that didn't work. The segregated schools didn't work. Now we find ourselves again back in the segregated schools.
Why, I don't want to interrupt you, except that before we get to the part about what you want done, why did the black community let this happen?
The black community didn't just let this happen.
Or get to the point where it even got to the bond issue, because, I mean, they could have taken legal action or threatened legal action. I think they could have at least gotten a better shot.
But you also have to understand the whole climate of the city. The whole climate of the city really has been going down, you know, for a number of years. You know, I don't want to tie it to this racially. I don't want to tie it specifically to this mayor, but just the way that this mayor came in, with the World Herald cleaning him up over the weekend, you know, the weekend before the election. And they brought in this person to take this lie, to give the mayor a lie detector test, and the mayor was so happy that he passed it. But that established a racial climate. Because
he was running against a black woman?
He was running against a black woman, and he was running on a platform that said, you know, if you vote for this black woman, you vote for Ernie Chambers. So he established this race card.
He didn't do it alone.
He didn't do it alone.
The police union helped.
He didn't do it alone.
A few other things.
The police union, the fire union were right there with him at that time. But everything was established along this racial climate. This transpired into resegregation of the schools. It has transpired into several of the topics of our protest.
Okay, but Omaha, I guess the thing is, for years and years, yes, there were people that were unhappy, white people that were unhappy of having their kids bussed around town. I know black people who were unhappy having their kids bussed around town. They had kids in 3 different schools in 3 different areas, couldn't attend, especially single parents, attend parent-teacher conferences and be involved. I think there was an honest hope to re-involve people in their neighborhoods and in their schools, which may result in separate but either equal or unequal, depending on your point of view. That may be unacceptable, but I think there was some honest desire to keep children closer to home.
You can say that. I guess I don't feel the same way.
Okay, all right.
I don't feel
I'm
that
not
desire
disagreeing
was
with you.
honest.
Okay.
I feel that the desire was there. The desire was not honest. The folks that resegregated the Omaha public schools knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly what they were doing. People talk about they were tired of busing, or they were tired of the way that busing was handled. And yet today we find that there's more busing going on in Omaha right now than there was then.
It does seem rather
And
convoluted.
it costs more right now than it did then. So, busing really wasn't the issue. Of course, people want their children to go to neighborhood schools. I would love to have my kids walk to school where I can, if I needed to go and be involved in the school, I can go to the school, I could walk to the school with my kid or go to the school in the neighborhood and visit a classroom and see what's going on. I would love to be able to do that. But when you have neighborhood schools and when you leave the administration in the hands of those who it's in the hands of, it's basically in the hands of white males, and it has been and it will be, unless we do something about it. What you end up with is segregated schools, and you end up with 2 different systems. In the black neighborhood, you have separate, unequal schools, and that's what we have today. What we're saying is, we tried segregation, we tried integration, why not try something different?
All right. Although I might take issue with the intentional trying to resegregate the schools on the part of a community at large. Let's assume that you were able to secede, so to speak, in a school district point of view, and you were able to set your own mill levy, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, because of years and years of that being the inner city and the wealth moving out west, for whatever reason, you're not going to have the kind of tax base that you're going to need to do the things you want to do to elevate the schools and hopefully the education and minds of your young people.
That may be true and it may not be true. What we're saying is we look at the Omaha Public School District and we look at, first of all, the TAC building and the number of people who are involved in the administration of this particular school district.
We should explain, a lot of people still haven't gotten the jargon right. Teacher Administration Center, I believe, TAC. It's the old Tech High.
The old Tech High building. But basically, when you look at the parking lot, when you go by the TAC building and look at the parking lot and look at the number of administrators that it actually takes to run this particular school district, and when you look at the test scores and you see the results of having this heavy, top-ended administration, it's unreal.
Well, I read in the paper, now I know it's the Omaha World Herald, but that the test scores are starting to look like they're making a move.
No, the test scores are starting to look better, but better than what? Better than terrible.
Okay, they were not real good.
They were not real good, and even though they look better, they still do not look real good in a whole lot of the schools. And what we're saying is we can do a better job at educating our youngsters. We're also saying that we can do a cheaper job at educating our youngsters. Instead of putting so much money into the top-end administration, we feel that we can put money into salaries. We definitely feel that we can do a better job at educating our youngsters than the Omaha Public School District currently is.
Okay. That's one of your demands. You are currently organizing yourself so that you can put these demands into practice, maybe research what needs to be done to push them into happening.
Exactly.
And middle of July, you plan to sort of get a little more formal structure to the...
We're going to kick it off. Basically what we're doing is we've made 10 demands to the city, and we expect these demands to be met. What we're going to do is we're going to form committees to work on each one of these demands. Citizens of, from all over Omaha, basically, who have expressed an interest in a particular area. And what we're trying to do now is form those committees. On July 15th, we will formally have an open forum. And again, we will thank the people who have contributed to us, the people who have volunteered their time and their money to this effort. And we will then kick off the committee process, where we actually form the committees and choose committee leaders and establish times and places where we'll meet and things like this.
Before we get to some of the other demands or ideas or concerns, I mean, obviously some of them are very obvious. You can go through North Omaha and you can see serious pockets of lack of development, where it's basically stood still and therefore fallen behind over a number of years. I mean, you can't stand still and not fall behind in the world.
That's a fact.
Today. But one of the demands was the firing of an Omaha police officer. Is that still
Yes.
on your list of demands?
Oh, definitely.
A white Omaha police officer that shot and killed a black man in October of '97.
Yes.
Marvin Ammons.
Yes.
Certainly a celebrated, and I don't mean in a happy way, but in terms of its notoriety, a case in the Omaha community. Happened during the midst of a snowstorm. A lot of poor handling, to say the least, of the public information
To say the least. Sure.
afterwards, and even the body of the young man. Went through courts, went through civil suit, and you're still going to demand the firing in a process where we have civil. I mean, we have that system protects black officers as well as white officers in terms of the ability to hire and fire.
That system is supposed to, yes. But we say that the system failed. I went to the civil court, for instance, and
The civil when the proceedings were going on.
Right. You know, you don't know if it's a problem with the prosecution or a problem with the defense or a problem with the instructions that the judge might have given as far as the questions that were asked. But it seemed as if certain questions could not be asked during that time.
Like they were taboo? Or
like
just
they
not
were
allowed?
taboo or just not allowed. It's almost as if this has already been settled, so you can't ask these types of questions. But either way, it was just a terrible circumstance, and unfortunately, unprofessional actions resulted in Marvin Ammons' death. And if we can go through the entire court system and have the courts basically exonerate the police officers and say, no, you're not responsible, well, then who is responsible? Marvin Ammons is dead.
Yes, he is.
It was a tragic event, and nobody's responsible. And if we are to say that this is all right, the courts went through this process and justice was served, then we would have no argument. Unfortunately, we are saying, yes, it went through this process. Justice was not served, and therefore, because of the fact that there is no justice, there will be no peace.
Okay,
and we're saying,
I'm
yes,
sorry.
here's a person who was killed in a tax-paying citizen. Killed a tax-paying citizen. And yet there was no reason why this happened. There was no responsibility. There was no fault. It's almost as if they're trying to blame Marvin Ammons for being killed. And we're saying, this is crazy. This is insane.
You lived and were active during the civil rights movement.
Yes.
And in any sort of civil rights movement or human rights movement, there are certain, and I don't have the word right here, but there are certain issues, hallmarks, where you say, this must be done. Or basically, you who have been unjust to us, it's like all or nothing. If you don't give us all of these things, then you are racist pigs or inhuman creatures or Nazis or whatever.
Okay.
I guess I look at many of the things that you're asking and saying, many of these things are long overdue. But perhaps and I guess I'm just a white girl, you know, but I have great sympathy and empathy as much as I can for what you are talking about. But there are certain things that I can't maybe, I'm not saying myself, but as watching watching this show, I can't get into that. Mm-hmm. Do people have to be for you or against you?
Oh, not at all.
Sometimes I get that feeling with quote-unquote minority movements, those who feel that they have been treated unjustly.
People don't have to feel for us or against us. And definitely, because of the fact that we have pinpointed so many issues, we don't even expect people to agree with all of our issues. The majority of the people who so far are in the Coalition Against Injustice don't agree with all the issues.
So it's not even going to be, I know in the past it was like if you are black or brown, or if it, like in the women's movement, if you were women, if you didn't buy into everything 100%, you didn't have a part.
No, this is a coalition. You can buy into one part of it and have a goal. You know, I will work to eliminate this injustice. You know, what we're trying to do and what we tried to do was to identify the injustices that have been going on within the black community, not only today, but for a number of years. And then we tried to come up with a valid, viable remedy for some of the problems. But we have many problems, and we identified many problems. We certainly didn't identify all of them, and certainly didn't identify all of the major ones. But we wanted to identify some of the ones that we could work on, and some of the ones that we actually had people working in groups or who were willing to form groups to work on, to resolve. I didn't create any of these issues, but I intend to resolve some of them. Whether or not we resolve all of them, or whether or not this is an all or nothing type of situation, I guess I don't feel that way. My feeling is there are things that Omaha needs to work on. Omaha leadership needs to work on. And they need to resolve some issues.
The fact that you sort of came out of retirement, I mean, in a sense, literally you did. You retired from Union Pacific, and you are a veteran of some of the civil rights issues of the past, going back to the old Peony Park, and only whites in this pool, young man.
This is true.
The fact that you have seen leadership come and go in the black community, and the fact that you are putting yourself on the line for this now, are you saying that there is a leadership void in the black community?
There's a void in the black community, whether or not it's a leadership void or an apathy void or whatever. What we're saying is certain things happen. There are supposedly organizations within our community that should, could, would
Well, I think of the Urban
handle
League
a lot of these.
traditionally, the NAACP.
Yes, and you look at the Urban League, and yes, there's a leadership void there. You look at the NAACP. I don't think there's a leadership void with the NAACP. I think there's a membership void with the NAACP. I think that the things that the NAACP normally would work on require some people who are willing to do some work. And if your organization does not have people who are willing to do work, then the work's not going to get done.
Well, let me mention Reverend Everett Reynolds, who is a dear man, and it appears, from my vantage point, which is different than yours, I mean, I literally live and sit in a different way of looking at it, is a dear, dear man whose heart's the right place, but he's how old? And a lot of the members of the NAACP have been in there for the long haul, and I don't see a lot of new blood in a lot of some of these organizations.
This is true, and that's one of the problems. I used to be treasurer of the NAACP, going back a number of years, Buddy Hogan's days, in fact.
Oh yeah, A.B. Buddy Hogan.
Right. But even then, there was a struggle within the NAACP to get things done, and basically. The NAACP, you would think that it's the civil rights organization of the black neighborhood. In recent years, though, it's hard to say exactly what that organization is doing.
Its mission statement is, at least locally, is maybe a little fuzzy?
Not necessarily its mission statement. It could have the greatest mission statement in the world.
Action plan?
But its action plan is a little bit fuzzy. And that's what we're finding in Omaha today. We're finding a lot of organizations that, for whatever reason, it's kind of like this whole issue of resegregation of the schools. There were many black leaders that came out in favor of that. Reverend Reynolds of the NAACP came out in favor of that. To me, I had a problem with that because I feel, you know, all those years that the NAACP spent trying to integrate the schools, why would the NAACP all of a sudden come back and then say, let's go back to resegregation? But then that was the way that I saw it.
Right. And as you said, everybody's not going to see all aspects of everything in a community the same way.
And definitely not the same way.
But you've got, you know, icons in the black community, Ernie Chambers being one. Frank Brown, now serving on the council, seems to be getting a lot accomplished.
Sure.
Tariq Alameen, the Midwest Guardians black police officers group. And there are some other, over the years, I remember Mildred Brown was part of that sort of old guard structure. But to me, in covering news all these years, it's like nobody ever challenged Ernie. No, I mean, you know, there were certain icons that you just didn't do. And then everybody assumed, though, that Ernie was going to take care of everybody's business for him. I'm not, maybe that was putting too much on Ernie because he has kind of a greater mission serving the state as well as his community. But you know what I mean? It's like, and I almost think that that kept leadership from percolating.
I don't know if that kept leadership from percolating, but when you talk about the political atmosphere, that's probably a fairly good observation. But Ernie can only do certain things.
Like I said, he serves a little
Frank Brown can only do certain things.
greater constituency in a way.
Right. And you hope that you know, Ernie can do what we voted Ernie to do without having to do all of these other things. And that's basically where the coalition how the coalition came about. Ernie can't do everything.
No.
And Frank Brown can't do everything. Eventually, the people have to do something. And basically the coalition is, you know, it was formed. We're a group of really community folk from different organizations who got tired of talking about why something wasn't being done or wouldn't it be better if this was done. And we decided that we would do something. And
well,
unfortunately, we had to start by hitting Omaha over the head.
The one thing that I heard mentioned time and time again by folks that I knew, and they were minorities included, both brown and black, was that the one thing that upset them about the whole thing regarding the College World Series was the Nazi symbol on one of the signs that got in the paper. Now, obviously, you believe in free speech, and your people came and brought signs.
Sure.
Did you have any problem with that? I mean, I know there's injustice.
No, I had no problem with the Nazi symbol, and I had no problem with, I remember the sign that you're talking about, I had no problem with the message that was displayed on the sign. The Nazi symbol, if you had read the words.
I can't recall the words on there.
But all I'm saying is if you read the words on the sign, then you understand the reason why the Nazi symbol was displayed.
I can't recall the words.
I don't recall offhand.
I guess the reason that people were upset because, at least as history we were taught, and we know there's various kinds of history taught, but was that the Nazis stood for the end goal of a total annihilation of a race. And that...
It was much more than that. In fact, it was much more beyond just one race.
well, the blacks, Jews, or...
And you had gypsies, you had
right, of inferior
people who were afflicted, you know,
but
physically.
I mean, but the main thrust before it sort of came to a temporary halt was...
That's the main thrust that we get through the
gays,
media.
It was gays, blacks, gypsies, as you point out, but the point was annihilation of an quote-unquote inferior races. And there was just a little offense taken that they agreed with what you were doing, but kind of...
If you look for reasons to knock something, or if you look for reasons to disagree, you will find them. If you look for the reason why we were at the College World Series expressing our First Amendment right to free speech,
which I'm all in favor of,
you would come up with something different. Now, all I'm saying is, you know, somebody can look for a Nazi sign, somebody can look for a curse word.
People were looking. I read the comments
in the
Omaha.com, the people would write in their comments. But the people I was speaking of, at least to my knowledge, and I can't see in their hearts, were not looking.
If they were reading the message, instead of looking at a Nazi sign to find something to disagree with, then they would have either agreed with the message or disagreed with the message instead of a symbol that was included along with the message. What I'm saying is the important thing was the message.
Okay, we've got about 3 minutes left. This time goes like gangbusters. Go through, at least as it stands now, just off the top of your head as best you can, the rest of your demands so that our
Ooh,
viewers...
off the top of my head.
Well, as best you can. This is not a test.
No,
you don't
no,
get graded.
There are certain things that will make an impact on the city. One of the things that we're asking for instance, we're asking for all these boards that dispense monies or determine how monies are going to be spent or have budgets.
Tax monies or...
Tax monies.
Or,
we're talking about tax monies
Okay.
here, and from various sources. We're asking that they be appointed by the city council instead of the mayor.
okay.
They used to, under the charter, be appointed by the city council. This was back before district elections.
Correct.
And when the city council and the mayor were all elected and they were basically all on the same ticket, then it made sense for the city council to just basically turn these powers over to the mayor. And that's what has happened over the years.
Okay, another one, because we're running out.
We talked about the school district. We talked about firing Todd Sears. We're asking for a complete investigation, independent investigation of what happened to $110 million in federal block grant funds that came in earmarked for North Omaha that definitely weren't spent there. They came in
I think
Omaha,
that
they
would
were
prove
spent somewhere.
interesting.
We just want to know where they went, who stole them, and
Well, you're alleging
where,
they were stolen,
where
but it
they're
still
now
would be
being
interesting.
housed. you
Okay,
know.
okay.
We're asking for, and one of the things is, Frank, we're asking for a civilian review board.
Right.
Civilian review board with subpoena power, investigative power, and adequate funding.
And that proposal is in the works.
There is a proposal in the
proposal.
works without subpoena power, without
Okay.
complete investigative power, and hopefully it's adequately funded.
All right?
But there's an independent auditor in the works.
That's right.
We've asked for a comprehensive year-round program for youth. To fund a program for youth. It's completely insane for teenagers, especially in North Omaha, to have absolutely nothing to do. You know, this year there was a limited job program. There are, you know, when you stop and think about the Sundog program,
Yeah.
it is very limited in our
You could
area.
take the whole recreational area and give it a good once over. But we're running out of time. Are you going to work to defeat Haldab? Your coalition, do you know at this point?
There are very few people in our coalition who won't work hard to defeat Haldab.
Well, listen, you keep us posted, and I hope that the news media will at least let you be heard. Thank you so much.
I do too.
Carol Sparks for joining us. Coalition Against Injustice, assuming you're easy to get a hold of. I found you in the book.
Very.
All right. And thank you for joining us today on Consider This.
Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Bass & Associates and First Data Resources.